Not only that, I will give you some examples of exactly this happening from the Islamic world. These are from a very informative, wonderful group that I highly recommend you all look into their website, MEMRI, MEMRI.org. The Middle East Media Research Institute performs an extraordinarily valuable service in translating material from the Arabic press into English. For example, this from the Arabic language daily Al-Sharq Al-Awsat from London, an interview with Nidal, who was the mother of one of the suicide bombers, Muhammad Farhat. And see, you know, in wartime, all you have to do is look at Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and you see, in wartime, a lot of things happen that are difficult to justify ethically according to one's own standards. However, it's a different case in this matter because you have exactly the justification coming from their ethical standards. She says, this lady says, jihad is a religious commandment imposed upon us. We must instill the idea in our sons' souls all the time. What we see every day, massacres, destruction, bombing of homes, and there's no doubt about that. There's no doubt that these people are suffering tremendous injustices. Strengthened in the souls of my sons, especially Muhammad, the love of jihad and martyrdom. Then the interviewer asked, did you have a role in planting this spirit in Muhammad? She says, Allah be praised, I'm a Muslim, and I believe in jihad. Jihad is one of the elements of the faith, and this is what encouraged me to sacrifice Muhammad in jihad for the sake of Allah. Because I love my son, I encouraged him to die a martyr's death for the sake of Allah. Of course, this is a very different idea of martyrdom from the Christian idea, not the idea of sacrificing yourself for the faith, but of actually murdering other people for the sake of a wartime objective. But she goes on to say, there's no disagreement among scholars on such matters. This is an easy thing. And see, this is what I've come to say, not that all Muslims are terrorists, or all Muslims are evil, or that all Muslims are going to come and want to kill us, not in the slightest, but that Muslims every day are being taught from the Quran in this manner, and just simply to say, well, those are just the extremists and they're off in the corner, is to ignore the reality of the situation, that really the group that has the best claim to be the mainstream in Islam at this point is actually this group. The online magazine Al-Ansar, a columnist, wrote this, Allah told us of the certainty of the annihilation of the infidels. Now you note the religious language here. This is what I'm chiefly trying to point out. He's not saying that this is war, that we are suffering various economic or political injustices and so on. This is a religious struggle. He clarified that this would be achieved in one of two ways, by means of a direct act of Allah, or by means of the Muslim group, which would, in accordance with the Islamic commandment, serve as an implement for carrying out this divine decree. Quoting the Quran, Surah 9:52, Allah will torture the infidels himself or at our hands. So you have this in the book, and it's presented as a commandment. Whether or not, once again, whether or not it's strictly speaking by everyone's canons of interpretation, a legitimate interpretation of the verse, it's certainly an easy one and a widespread one. Sheikh Omar Bakri of Britain, who was he made the headlines for holding a rally last September 11th, 02, in support of Al-Qaeda's actions on September 11th, 01. He said, Allah willing, we will transform the West into Dar al-Islam, the House of Islam. Classic Islamic theology divides the world into two parts, the House of Islam, Dar al-Islam, and the Dar al-Harb, the House of War. And the House of War must always diminish before the House of Islam's advances, which can be by military force. Allah willing, we will transform the West into Dar al-Islam by means of invasion from without. If an Islamic state arises and invades the West, we will be its army and its soldiers from within. If not, we will change the West through ideological invasion from here, without war or killing. Now, the very interesting thing about Bakri is that they asked him then, he's a very fascinating character in many ways, and he's very clever. They asked him, how can you stay here as a British citizen and preach the destruction of the British state? And he says this, as long as my words do not become actions, they do no harm. Here, the law does not punish you for words, as long as there's no proof you've carried out actions. In such a case, you're still on the margins of the law, and they cannot punish you. If they want to punish you, they must present evidence against you. Otherwise, their laws will be in a state of internal contradiction. And he's absolutely right. How far can a tolerant state go tolerating a group that's determined to kill it? He goes on to say, then this will serve Islam, because we will be able to claim that the capitalist camp has failed in the face of the Islamic camp in actualizing the things in which it believes, freedom of expression. Either you have freedom of expression or you don't. But how much freedom of expression can you have when the people are expressing, we will kill you all, we will destroy this? Friday sermons from Saudi Arabia. Every Friday, good Muslims go to the mosque and they hear khutbah, the Friday sermon. And the imams who teach the Friday sermons in our ally Saudi Arabia had this to say recently. In Medina, one of the holy cities of Islam, Sheikh Abdulaziz Qadi said, two groups, the Jews and the Christians, are the main elements constituting the camp of kufr, unbelief, and will continue to be its two foundations until Allah allows their downfall and annihilation at the end of days. In conjunction with this, in a mosque in Mecca, another sheikh said, the call for the unification of religions, he was discussing the visit of the Pope to the mosque in Syria. They were very upset about that, and saying that they're trying to bring all these religions together. The call for the unification of religions will lead to presenting the infidel school of thought as correct, and to silence regarding them, to permitting conversion to Judaism and Christianity with no shame whatsoever. And I quote that because I wanted to point out that in classic Islamic law, once again, a convert from Islam to Christianity or to any other religion is under a death sentence. And this indicates that they take that very seriously. I know personally some very fine men who've converted from Islam to Christianity, and they have taken assumed names. They're not in particular danger here in the United States, at least we hope, but for the sake of their families, who are still Muslims in their home countries, they have to disassociate themselves from them. Because, once again, these things are not just laws on the books that everyone ignores. Would that were so. I mean, it would be better if they weren't even there. There can be, this is also the same sermon. This is more in service of the fact that we are dealing with a group of people that is not interested in coexistence. There can be neither an agreement nor a meeting point between the people of Islam and the Jewish and Christian people of the book. People of the book is the term used in the Quran for the Jews and the Christians primarily, also the Zoroastrians. How can we allow the Catholic popes talk of a need to find meeting points and agreement between Islam and Christianity so that there will be peaceful coexistence between the two religions and harmony between the two communities? If the infidels live among the Muslims, they have to live in accordance with the conditions set out by the Prophet. Now, this is also part of Islamic law and is an indication of people with a fundamentally different mindset from that which would allow for mutual tolerance and coexistence in a secular framework. He goes on to delineate these conditions. There's nothing wrong with it, provided they pay the jizya, the special tax on non-Muslims. Other conditions are that they do not renovate a church or a monastery, that they do not rebuild ones that were destroyed, so you can't build a new church or repair an old one, so you're in a perpetual state of decline. That they feed for 3 days any Muslim who passes by their homes, that they rise when a Muslim wishes to sit, that they do not imitate Muslims in dress or speech. That's an interesting one. It was actually, you hear a lot about the yellow star during World War II that the Jews were made to wear, not without making any connection between Islam and Nazis in any sense. It was actually the Islamic world that originated the idea of different dress for religious minorities in the Middle Ages in accordance with this provision. That they do not ride horses, nor own swords, nor arm themselves with any kind of weapon, that they do not sell wine, do not show the cross, do not ring church bells, do not raise their voices during prayer, that they shave their hair in front so as to make them easily identifiable, and that they do not incite anyone against these Muslims and do not strike a Muslim. If they violate these conditions, they have no protection. Now, I want to point out, I'm not reading to you, I mean, I could be reading to you some old law from the Middle Ages that's 1,000 years old and nobody's paid attention to. This was a sermon preached a couple weeks ago in Saudi Arabia, in our ally here. Also, these provisions appear pretty much exactly as they're laid out by this gentleman in this book, Reliance of the Traveler, which is a manual of Islamic law printed in Cairo at Al-Azhar University. Al-Azhar University is the oldest university in the world, and it has great prestige in the Islamic world.